Sharing, everyone should be able to see my slides, okay? So we're going to have a look at this thing that we call FIRAC. Now, as I said, no one should have a panic attack at this point. FIRAC is an acronym. That's the F stands for facts, the I for issue, the R for rule of law, the A for application, and C for conclusion. Okay. This is important because, like I said, one day when you are admitted or you are working at a private firm and you need to do a brief for an advocate or whatever the case may be, you need to be able to summarize a case into a one-pager so that you can have a look at this one page and know what a case is about. So ultimately, a FIRAC method is used to be able to summarize a case and to be able to demonstrate that you understand what is going on in a particular case. Okay. So the most important part of the FIRAC is that we need to make sure that our judgment is condensed. It's a summary of most important information. Okay, so this needs to be helpful not only to help us to discuss the case and to be able to pass on the important information of a case to the next person when we do our summary, but it also helps us to compare different cases to one another. Okay, so for example, if I go to court and I have a trial, I'm not going to sit with 15 pages of this judgment, 15 pages from another judgment, and scrape through all 15 pages when I'm standing in front of a judge. Okay, I'm only going to have one page summary of the most important case, and then maybe another one pager, which is another summary of another important case. There's no way that you can stand in court paging through documents and trying to figure out whether this particular case applies to yours, whether the facts are similar. It needs to be boom, 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 4 lines, most important information, and you need to be able to look at your FIRAC summary and say, yes, those are the facts, this is what the legal issue was in this case, and this is how it was applied, etc. Okay. So, most important thing to remember about FIRAC is we need to identify the key information, we need to summarize it, we need to be short, we need to be concise, we need to be to the point. But firstly of all, we'll need help in identifying where we start and what goes into the summary. So, as I said, facts, issue, rule of law, application, and conclusion. Rightios. Okay, so let's start with facts. Normally with a FIRAC, normally how a FIRAC works is we can put the headings, facts, 1, 2, 3, 4. Issue, this is the legal issue. R, the rules applicable are, ... Okay? So you can put it under subheadings, but it could be that in a semester test or an exam, they could ask you to do a whole case summary in which you will incorporate the entire thing in one paragraph. But for now, if you put the important information under subheadings, that shouldn't be an issue, okay? So for our facts, we need to discover what the key information is, right? So this is why we looked at what is an applicant, what is an appellant, what is a plaintiff, what is a defendant, where the state gets involved. We need to be able to identify who, what, where, when, how, okay? So normally what we'll also identify in our fact section is where are we? What court are we in? Are we in a high court? Are we in a lower magistrates court? Are we in Mpumalanga or are we in Bloemfontein? Okay, these are the important things that we need to identify. So let's quickly take a walk through this. If we have a quick look here at the other judgment that I showed you right in the beginning of the session, we can see that this is in the Supreme Court of Appeal. Okay, I've already told you there's only one in the country, so we know for a fact it is in Bloemfontein. Right, so we can see here that there is an appellant and there is a respondent. So this is definitely an appeal. Right, so our important facts are the following. The appellant is the Road Accident Fund, number 1. Number 2, the respondent is Mrs. Mbele. Okay. Number 3, this is an appeal. This is an appeal that was heard in the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein. Okay. We can even put in information like this was a judgment that was handed down on the 22nd of June, 2020. Right. So that's the who, and that is the where of our facts information that we need to put in. Now we need to give a little bit more of a background as to what this case is about, right? Because it doesn't help if we have the parties' names, but we have no idea what the case is about. So in this instance, we were very lucky. We had a nice head note that gave us a nice little summary. So if I'm doing my FIRAC, my case summary from this whole 14-page judgment, we actually scored the jackpot here because it gives us a nice summary. So I can identify that this case is about a motor vehicle collision, an accident. Yeah? It is a claim for damages against the Road Accident Fund. Okay, and then a whole bunch of other whole bunch of information. But the important thing is I've told you in my FIRAC who the parties are, told you where we were, what court we were in, and now I've told you more or less what it's about. This case is about a motor vehicle accident. Okay. So now that we've got an example of our facts, let's go back here. Okay. So who is involved? We've identified the parties. Easy peasy, we know how to identify an applicant, a respondent, etc. What happened and what do they want? Right. So let's go back to this judgment here. And let's see, by avoiding the summary, let's not cheat and look at the summary. Let's have a look. Let's see from this judgment if we can figure out where we are and what we could possibly want. Okay. So, okay. So what could we possibly want? We see here that the issue in this appeal is whether a large industrial vehicle called a reach stacker is a motor vehicle as contemplated in Section 1 of the RAF Act. Okay. So we can kind of determine that we are here because the issue in this appeal is whether a vehicle known as a reach stacker, whatever that might be, is deemed a motor vehicle as contemplated for in the Road Accident Fund Act. So that's more or less what this thing could possibly be about. Ultimately, the applicant is approaching the court to ask the court whether this large industrial vehicle is actually a motor vehicle, whether it qualifies as a motor vehicle as contemplated for in the RAF Act. Okay. So that was looking at our facts. When did it happen? Okay. Let's have a look and see. When did this happen? Blah, blah, blah. Okay. On the 20th of February, 2010, something happened. Here we can see that the deceased, okay, the person that is now dead, was a pedestrian at the harbor. He was employed there, and he died as a result of injuries that he sustained in a collision. Okay. Where did it happen, right? Our question is also answered here. It happened at the multi-purpose terminal in Cape Town. Okay. So, for our facts for this particular judgment that we are using as an example, we can see that on the 20th of February 2010, the deceased was a pedestrian at the harbor. He was employed there. He suffered injuries. As a result of the injuries, he passed away. Okay. Now we can see that the applicant, the Road Accident Fund, the appellant. The respondent is Mrs. Mbele. Okay. They've brought an appeal in the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein, right, where they have asked whether a reach stacker is a motor vehicle. Okay. So that's our facts. We've identified our facts. That is what we put underneath the facts heading. Okay. That is the gist, that is the basic summary of what this whole 14, 15-page thing is about. Alrighty. So now we've done the facts, we move on to the I for issue. What is the legal issue? Now, in some cases, we'll be super lucky and a judgment will actually tell us that the issue here is that the sentence that Kendall got for murdering her husband was too long, or the legal issue here is whether Kendall should have been found guilty of murder. So if they give us the issue like that, we can copy paste, put it in our own words, and that's what our legal issue is. We don't have to mess around with it at all. So let's have a look and see here. Aha, so jackpot once again. The issue in this appeal is whether a large industrial vehicle called a reach stacker is a motor vehicle. Okay, so we're going to copy and paste this legal issue and put it underneath our issue heading in our FIRAC summary. That is the legal issue. That is what needs to be answered in this case. Remember, when we come to court, we are asking the court to make an order, to make some sort of a finding, to answer our question, to answer the entire case that we are bringing to court. Court needs to give us a ruling. So when we identify the issue, we are ultimately identifying what the court needs to answer. And in this case, we can see that the issue is the court needs to tell us whether this reach stacker vehicle is a motor vehicle as identified in the road accident fund. Okay, that is the question that the court needs to answer. That is what the legal issue is. Okay. This is the legal issue of your set of facts. Okay, it is the legal question that is presented by the court, or to the court rather, by the parties concerned. Excuse my typo there. What is the problem that needs to be solved? As I've indicated here, your legal issue is concise, but it must tell you exactly what the court needs to answer. So short and sweet. It doesn't need to be a whole long story, a whole long paragraph, not necessary. It must tell us though what the actual issue is. Okay, so I've placed a link here on the slides that you can also go and have a look at. It will help you to identify what a legal issue is. Like I said, sometimes we are just super lucky and the case will tell us directly that the issue is X, Y, and Z. Okay, you don't need to faff it up. That is what the issue is. That is what you're going to copy and paste under your issue headline. Okay. So the rule of law. Now, this is where students tend to get a little bit confused every now and again, but I'm going to hold your hand and make sure that we all understand this. Okay, I don't know why students tend to get confused at this point, because the rule of law is actually quite self-explanatory. Okay. The heading is the rule of law, which refers to the rules. What legal rules are applicable in deciding a case or in summarizing a case? What are the sources? What are the rules that need to be looked at in a specific case? Okay, so it's literally what it says. What are the rules? Okay, so normally we'll have a look at the judgment and we'll see where's case law. Okay, what is the act that is referred to? Now, the reason why they refer to acts, like I said in the very beginning, is when we have a specific act, for example, the Road Accident Fund Act, they will have a section where they define what a motor vehicle is, for example. Ultimately, this case here is asking whether this reach stacker is a motor vehicle as contemplated in the act. So the rule of law here, the act, the piece of legislation that needs to be looked at and applied to this specific set of facts or incorporated in this judgment would be the Road Accident Fund Act. Okay. It is the rule, it is the legal rule that is applicable when we are dealing with motor vehicles in this particular instance. Okay. So like I said, you have a look at the act, you see what act is applicable. The act will be outlined in the judgment that is provided to you. It's not like you need to suck it out of your thumb. It's given to you. You just need to play detective and find it a little bit. Okay. So Let's have a look here. Okay, so what does the court use to come to a decision? Remember, we are summarizing this whole 14, 15-page story into a one-pager. Ultimately, this is a case where there's already been a decision, okay? There's a judgment that was given. So at the end, we'll get to the conclusion, which will tell us what happened in the judgment, okay? What was the ultimate decision of the court? But along the way, we need to identify under our rule of law what is used to be able to get, what does the court look at to get to this decision? Okay, so if it is, for example, like this, the motor vehicle, we can see here that it says the Road Accident Fund Act. A little guideline or a little hint, if it is a criminal matter, almost always the Criminal Procedure Act will be used, okay? Or the Criminal Law Amendment Act, which means that if you see that the state is one of these parties listed here, you should immediately think, aha, criminal matter. That means that the state is involved. That means that the Criminal Procedure Act or the Criminal Law Amendment Act must be involved. Okay, so this is just how you will acquaint yourself. You'll get yourself a bit familiar with how to identify acts. As I said, they will always give you the act. They will tell you what act they had a look at when they made a decision. You just need to look for it. Okay, so here right in the beginning, they tell us exactly. We looked at the Road Accident Fund Act. We need to look at that act again to be able to come to a decision about whether this reach stacker is a motor vehicle. Okay. So like I said, easy peasy, you identify the rule that is applicable. Alrighty. Okay. So this application, okay, the A in the FIRAC, the application is normally where the most marks are awarded. Why? Because the facts are pretty much given to you right from the beginning. Okay, so it doesn't take a rocket scientist for us to identify who the plaintiff is and who the defendant is, or what court we are in. It's not something that is very higher order thinking. You don't have to really go and apply yourself and look for it. But when we get to the application, we need to be able to identify what the rule of law was. What is the governing rule? For example, the Road Accident Fund Act. So we identify what the rule is, and then we apply that rule. We apply whatever states in that particular rule to our set of facts to help us to come to a conclusion. Okay, so it is telling us what the judge was thinking, how the judge reasoned to be able to come to a conclusion, how they took the rule of law, they applied it to your facts, and they got to a conclusion. So for example, if we look at this one with the RAF again, we already know that the rule of law is the Road Accident Fund Act. We know that the question here, or the issue, is whether this particular type of vehicle qualifies as a motor vehicle as envisaged in the Act. Let's just put it. So we can kind of see already that the application will be how the definition of a motor vehicle as contemplated in Section 1 of this Act would be applied to our facts. Okay. So here we can see, we read a bit further, that this reach stacker is a motor vehicle as contemplated. I apologize. Okay, so we need to see where they took this definition and applied it. It's got to be here somewhere. So let's have a look. Okay, the Road Accident Fund disputed it. They said that this reach stacker was not a motor vehicle as defined by the Act. But that was their argument. We need to find out what the judge used to come to a conclusion. So let's have a look and see. Okay, there's a whole bunch of subheadings here, how they came to the decision, etc. Okay, now this looks positive here. We can see that here they've used the test whether a vehicle is designed for use on a road is objective, okay? But it doesn't tell us exactly the definition and how the definition was applied here. So we know that we need to have a look a little bit further. Okay. We must be getting there. Okay. So long judgment. Okay. So we can see here that here they start to refer to sorry, I apologize. Give me a second. Okay, so we found it here. In paragraph 25, it says that in my view, remember this is the judge that is speaking and giving a judgment. So in the judge's view, the reach stacker under consideration is a motor vehicle as defined. So here we can see that they've taken the definition as defined in section 1 of the Road Accident Fund Act, and they've had a look at what the definition stipulates. Despite its imposing and gigantic size and speed limitation, it cannot be said that its driving on a road used by pedestrians and other vehicles would be extraordinarily difficult and hazardous. Okay, so this is how the specific rule, the specific definition of the Road Accident Fund Act was applied to the specific set of facts. They've also gone further to say that it has a lot of features of a motor vehicle, as mentioned above. Okay? It has windscreen wipers, it has indicators. So ultimately, when we are looking at the application of the rule, we take this rule and we apply it to our set of facts, which is now whether this reach stacker qualifies as an actual vehicle. We take the definition, we apply it to the type of car that we have and whether this car meets the requirements as set out in this act. And that is how we apply it. And once we've applied the definition to the actual set of facts, then we can come to a conclusion. So that is the conclusion that the judge comes to. They take the definition, they apply it to our facts. And for example, in this case, they take the definition saying, if a car, for example, has 2 windscreen wipers and it can drive more than 10 km an hour, then it is a motor vehicle. So they take that definition, they apply it, and then they come to the conclusion saying that if we apply that definition to this car has windscreen wipers. It can go more than 10 km an hour. Therefore, the court must find that this is a motor vehicle. And that will be your conclusion after we've applied the rules to our set of facts. Okay. Now, the conclusion, very easy peasy, this section, okay? It's also going to be a copy and paste situation. You don't need to put anything fancy in your conclusion because it is ultimately the conclusion that the judge comes to in the judgment. So the conclusion here would be that the appeal is dismissed with costs, including the costs of the 2 counsel were employed. That is the conclusion. That is the final thing of this case. You don't need to put anything else in here. No description of what's happening. All you need to do is tell me that the appeal was dismissed with costs, including costs of 2 counsel, because that's what finally happened. Okay, there wasn't another order that was given. The outcome didn't change here. In this instance, the appeal was dismissed. Okay, so that's all that we need to stipulate for purposes of our conclusion.